Hello and welcome to another Magic the Gathering draft video. It's Al here with you. This is how to draft MTG. Today we're looking at Aetherdrift. It drops tomorrow on MTG Arena. It's been a little while since I've talked to you guys, and finally we've got a set to talk about here, so let's get right into it. As always, I'd ask you to take a quick second to click that like button, click the subscribe button, and if you really like the channel a lot and you want to support even more, or maybe you have a question or a comment on this video, click on that comment section below, type something in there. Really appreciate that as well. All right, getting into it. We're talking about the early picks for Aetherdrift. When you open your pack, most likely you're going to take your rare, but if you don't like what you see there, then you're going to be looking for some of these cards that we're going to discuss here. Early picks for me are based on rate, which is sort of how much mana you're spending versus how much you're getting out of the card. Power level, just straight up how good is the card, how powerful is it. Curve considerations, typically we want to choose cheaper cards, lower mana value cards before higher mana value cards. And synergy, which is just how well does this work with the mechanics of the set or what we expect to be good in the set. And of course, we want to stay flexible, so these cards are mostly going to be monocolor, single-colored cards, as they leave us more open to choosing different paths as we go through the draft. So, of course, it's going to include our premium removal. We've got Grim Bauble, which is a single black for an artifact, gives something -2/-2. You can sacrifice it later. Lightning Strike, classic red spell, 2 mana, deal 3 to anything. Road Rage, single red, deal 2, could be more if you've got some vehicles. Outpace Oblivion, 2 and a red, deal 5, gets some speed going. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, and can deal some extra damage to players. We got Detention Chariot, 4 white for a vehicle that comes down, exile something until it leaves the battlefield. It can also be cycled. It can also be crewed to be a 6/6. Pretty nice card here. Roadside Blowout, 2 and a blue. Returns a creature or vehicle to owner's hand, and you draw a card, and it even costs 2 less if you want to hit a 1 mana creature. Flood the Engine, 2 and a blue. Lock something down, loses all abilities. Sky Crash, 1 and a red, destroys an artifact, of which there are many in the set, and if it doesn't work for you, you can cycle it away for just a single red mana. Not too bad. Momentum Breaker, 1 and a black. Enchantment that makes them sacrifice something. You get your speed going. You can also sacrifice it later in the game to gain a few points of life. Plow Through, single green for a sorcery. The classic, your creature fights their creature, or you just straight up destroy a vehicle. Some of the rare vehicles are quite nice in this set, so being able to kill one of those for just a single green mana is going to be a huge blowout, which is why I like this card so much. All right, and a multicolored card here, Broadside Barrage, 1 blue-red for an instant, deals 5 to a creature, and then you get to draw a card and discard a card. It's just so much going on here that I think it's actually a good early pick despite being 2 colors. All right, talking about cards that are just really good rate, really good value for the mana that you're investing here. White's got Canyon Vaulter, a 2 mana 3/1 that saddles, mounts, and crews vehicles, gives them flying. Glory Heath Lynx, this is a big one. This might be the best uncommon in the whole set. This is 1 and a white for a 2/3 lifelink. It's got Saddle 2, which means you tap any combination of creatures with power 2 or more. It becomes saddled, and when it's saddled, if it attacks, you get to search for a basic plains and put it into your hand. So just a huge amount of rate here. Again, this is 2 mana for a 2/3 lifelink, which is already over the top, and then sometimes it's going to draw you extra lands, which is amazing. Nesting Bot, so 1 mana, 1/1. It starts your engines, gets the speed going. Let's talk about speed now. Why not? So when you see a card that says start your engines, you get a speed counter. It starts at 1, and then every time an opponent loses life on one of your turns, once per turn, you get an extra speed all the way up to 4. So you can play a start your engines card, damage them immediately, get to 2, and then over the course of the next 2 turns, if you can damage them again, you'll get to 4, and then you get some benefits for being at 4. So this does the speed thing. When it dies, it gives you a 1/1 artifact token, and if you have max speed, it's a 2/1. So just a whole lot going on here for a single white, and really synergizes well with every archetype in the format that white is involved in. Sundial Dawn Tyrant, 1 and a white for a 3/3 artifact creature, just a ton of rate again. Nimble Thopteress, 3 and a blue for a 3/2, that makes a 1/1 Thopter. Transit Mage is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 that searches for an artifact with mana value 4 or 5. So this could have been in my build around category, although I think it's going to be pretty easy to find an artifact of that mana value, and that's a lot of value. Going, this on turn 3 into a good artifact on turn 4, or even like a medium artifact on turn 4, just making sure you're curving out and getting that card advantage. Not a lot of ways to get card advantage in this set. So rounding out blue, we've got Spike Shell Harrier, 4 and a blue for a 4/4 artifact creature, bounces an opposing creature or vehicle, and reduces the player's speed. Diversion Units, 1 and a blue for a 2/1 flying. And later in the game, you can sacrifice it for a blue mana to counter an instant or sorcery spell unless the controller pays 3. So it could protect a bigger thing of yours from removal later on. Red's got Dracosaur Auxiliary. This is 4 red for a 4/4 flying haste. It's got Saddle 3. When it attacks while saddled, deals 2 damage to any target. So this is 6 hasty damage in the air to their face, if that's going to win you the game, or it's going to hopefully kill something of theirs. Grease Wrench Goblin is single red for a 2/1. Goblin Artificer. It's got an exhaust ability of 2 and a red. Exhaust is just an activated ability on a creature, but you can only do it 1 time. So 2 and a red, discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards and put a +1/+1 counter on the Grease Wrench Goblin. So early in the game, it's pressuring as a 2/1. Later in the game, it's discarding a couple lands you don't need, getting a little bit bigger, and drawing you some more gasoline to work with. Green's got Green Belt Guardian. 1 green for a 2/2, can give other creatures trample, and it's got exhaust for 4 mana. It gets 3 +1/+1 counters larger, becomes a 5/5. Fang Guardian, it's 3 and a green for a 4/2 with flash. When it enters, another target creature or vehicle you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. This one kind of looks bad, or at least I almost skimmed over it, but this is oftentimes going to win you a combat and then also give you a 4/2. So it's just a ton of rate. Again, we're just talking about rate here. Autark Mammoth, 4 green for a 5/5 that makes a 3/3. So you got 8/8 of stats for 6 mana, and then you can saddle this up for 5 mana and make more 3/3s. Like this probably should have been a rare. I don't know. All right, build around. So now we're going to talk about some cards I think you could pick up early, but you're going to need to draft some support for them. You're going to need to build around what they are trying to do. So Endrider Spike Spitter, for example, is 3 and a red for a 3/4 with reach. It's got start your engines, but you don't really want to be starting your engines on turn 4. So you want to make sure you're playing a deck that's starting your engines very early, and then when this comes down, you could take advantage of its max speed bonus, which says at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library, and you may play that this turn. So this is going to give you extra gas, as it were. Let's use a lot of driving and car puns in this one, right? Later in the game to help you, get those final points of damage in your aggressive deck, okay? Scrounging Skyray is 1 of the blue for a 1/2 with flying. When you discard 1 or more cards, you put that many +1/+1 counters on this creature. So you need to have ways to discard your cards, but you only need to do it, twice to really be happy with this. So it's not asking too much of you, but you do have to sort of have that consideration when you're building your deck. Hour of Victory, 2 and a black for an enchantment that makes a 2/2 zombie. Starts your engines, and at max speed, you can pay 1 and a black, sacrifice it to search your library for any card and put it into your hand. So again, you want to be playing a deck that's really interested in A, starting your engines, and B, getting up to max speed to take advantage of this card. Otherwise, it's a 3-mana 2/2, and that is really, really quite bad. Risen Necro Regents, 4 and a black for a 5/4 with start your engines. At max speed, it says at the beginning of your end step, you get a 2/2 black zombie. So another one where you really want to be at max speed at the time that you cast this so that you immediately get that 2/2 at the end of that turn. Fang Druid Summoners, 3 and a green for a 2/4 with reach. When it enters, you may search your library and or graveyard for a creature with no abilities. Reveal it, put it into your hand. So you need to have a good creature with no abilities. And there is a cycle of uncommon ones. A lot of them aren't that great, but the green one is really quite big, and there's another green one at common. And we saw the white one earlier, the 2-mana 3/3. So if you can make sure that you can pick up something worthwhile to search, this is really, really quite powerful. Now we're going to get into some of the quote-unquote signpost uncommons. These are the 2-color uncommons that I think are so good that you should take them early and try to build their decks. And actually, most of them fit into this category in this set, whereas that's not always the case. But here we go. Actually, I'm going to go through these quickly because we're going to talk about them individually. But the blue-white, both of the blue-white ones, I think, are in here. If they're not, they should be. Voyage Home. We got a green-red 1 Rocketeer Boost Buggy. We've got the black-red Gastel Thrill Seeker, the white-black Embalmed Ascendant, the red-white, both of the red-white cards, Cloudspire Coordinator and Cloudspire Sky Cycle. One of the red-blue cards, Boosted Sloop. The one of the black-blue cards, Haunt the Network. A green-white card, Veteran Beast Rider. A green-blue card, Sky Serpent Seeker. Whoops, go too far there. So yeah, any of these, I think, and again, we're going to talk about these more in depth. Any of these, I think you can take early and go for their 2-color archetypes from there. Okay, talk about some lands that I think are worth mentioning here. Not necessarily high picks. We're out of the high picks section. We're just going to talk about some lands for a second. So there's a couple of lands that are colorless, like Amonkhet Raceway, that say start your engines, and they only tap for colorless mana, and they have a max speed bonus. These I do not think you are supposed to play. Okay, so I know Start Your Engines is a cool mechanic. It's one of the featured mechanics of the set. But putting a colorless land in your deck is really quite painful. If you draw it early, which is when you want to be starting your engines, you're not going to be able to cast your spells on time. And if you draw it late, it just doesn't really do that much for you. So the only time I see playing 1 or 2 of these is if you're in a monocolored deck, and it remains to be seen whether or not those will even be able to be drafted. Usually they are not draftable. Monocolored decks, okay? But if you're in like mono red and you're playing, 16 or 15 mountains and you want to play one of these, sure. But I just don't see that happening. So beware, these are kind of traps, I think. Okay, and then we've got the full cycle of Bloodfell Caves type lands. So every 2-color pair has these. They enter tapped and they gain you a life, and they tap for 2 colors of mana. So these are a good indication that the format is going to be actually a little bit slower than you might think in terms of how quickly decks can kill you. Because if each deck is playing 1 or 2 of these, then life totals are actually artificially a little bit higher. So I actually am of the opinion this isn't going to be like a super, super aggressive set. And this is one of the reasons why. So these you can take at sort of like a C or C plus level if you're a letter grade type person. Basically, if you don't see anything in the pack that's worthwhile, or you're in the color pair that these lands provide, then yeah, you definitely want to take these. Okay, and then we've got a full cycle of these country roads type lands. There's 1 for each color. They enter tapped unless you control a mount or vehicle. They tap for the color they say, and then you can pay a cost and sacrifice them to create a pilot token. A pilot token is a 1/1 creature that can crew vehicles and saddle mounts as though its power were 2 greater. So essentially crews for 3. And you can activate that ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery spell. Okay, so these cards I think you're comfortable running 1 of in your decks. I would not run more than 1. I don't think you're ever going to have enough vehicles and mounts that these are going to reliably come into play untapped. That's just going to happen some of the time, and you're going to be happy about that. But I guess if you're in a deck that's got like 5 or 6 mounts in it and a few vehicles, and we're going to talk more about vehicles in a second, then yeah, maybe get away with a couple of these. But this is kind of dangerous territory where you don't want to hamstring yourself from casting your spells early. It's going to be important to cast spells early in this format. And, how many times are you going to be able to activate that ability later that it's actually going to be meaningful for you? So I think 1 is the right number for these. Now, a really good land we need to talk about is Night Market. This land enters tapped, and you get to choose a color and then add a mana of that chosen color when you tap it, right? So kind of a design we've seen before. This fits into any deck, and it also has cycling 3, so in the late game, you can pitch it if you don't need it. So, sorry. I'm touching buttons here by accident. This is a B- level card, again, if we're using that letter grade system. You're taking this along with any of those premium rate cards we talked about earlier. So it's really just sort of your choice. If you like one of those early pick cards better than this, then go ahead and take that. But if you don't see anything in the pack that's even remotely close to being like a top pick in the set and you see Night Market, just take Night Market, okay? This will be one of those cards that probably goes around a little bit later on Arena. You can take advantage of that. Okay, let's take a second to talk about vehicles. So vehicles have traditionally been a card type that is pretty underpowered. Now, they're a feature of this set, in terms of just sort of the flavor, of course, 'cause we're talking about like racing cars and whatnot. But I would be wary of including too many vehicles in your deck. So if we look at these first two here, Burner Rocket and Spot Cycle Scouter, 3-1 and 3-2 respectively with a crew cost of 1. So if we're not clear on crew, it just means tap any number of creatures you control with total power 1 or more, whatever the number is, and then that makes the vehicle into an artifact creature. So the problem with vehicles is that when they're on the battlefield and you don't have another creature to crew them, they do nothing. They're blank pieces of cardboard. They're just artifacts sitting there. They can't attack. They can't block. Okay. The nice thing about Burner Rocket and Spot Cycle Scouter is they come down and do something for you right away, but it's not really that powerful. +2/+0 and trample is like, sure, whatever. You're going to get a couple extra damage in. Your creature's probably still going to die in combat. The Scouter, Scry 2, yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's going to set up your draws, or late in the game, it's going to bottom some lands for you. But like, then you just have this piece of cardboard on the table that is only a 3/2 if you tap another creature you control. So how often are you going to want to turn one of your creatures into a 3/2? How meaningful is that? If it's a 2/2, it's not very meaningful. If it's a 1/1, like, yeah, it's okay, but like, at some point in the game, that's not going to matter at all. So I would really be wary of some of these common and uncommon vehicles. They're just not that powerful. Mounts, on the other hand, which are the other sort of feature type in the set, I think are a little bit better. They're not super pushed in power level either, most of them. I mean, the Lynx we saw earlier is really good, but like this Gilded Goda is 1 in a red for a 2/2. When it attacks while salvaged, you get a treasure token. That's really good if you can get free treasures, but at least it can attack and block as a 2/2 if you've got nothing else going on, and it's going to benefit and key off of all the other things in the set that care about vehicles and mounts. There's not really any cards in the set that care only about vehicles. They all say vehicle and mount. So I'm much more inclined to include mounts in my deck since they can actually do something on their own than I am to include vehicles. Now, that is not to say there's not some good vehicles. There's some really good ones at rare. So compare those two we just looked at to stuff like Possession Engine, 3 blue, removes a creature as long as it's in play, and then it can crew to become a 5/5. Okay, well that's, you're removing your opponent's best thing, and then maybe you're hitting them for 5 with this thing, or threatening to block, or whatever. There's some awkwardness there because you don't want it to die in combat, but that's a lot more power for 5 mana. I'm much more inclined to put this in my deck. Debris Beetle, 2 black, green for 6/6 trample with crew 2, and when it enters, each opponent loses 3 life, you gain 3 life. So this immediately has an effect. It pulls you back into the game in terms of the life total race, and it's enormous. Turning your 2/2 into a 6/6 trample is very, very impactful, right? So these are examples of vehicles I think you should try to play, but for the most part, don't assume that vehicles are going to be really good. Okay, into the archetypes. Now, we're going to talk about each 2-color pair archetype. I'm going to shout out their signpost uncommons and the rares that I think are geared towards these specific decks and ones that you might be able to pick up late if you're in the color pair. So here we go. Blue-white or white-blue artifacts. Guidelight Pathmaker is your first signpost. This one I sort of was waffling on in the high picks. I don't think this is a high pick. I'm just remembering now just because it does cost 6 mana. So 4 white-blue for a vehicle. It's a 6/5 with crew 2. It's got vigilance. When it enters, you may search your library for an artifact card and reveal it. It goes straight into play if its mana value is 2 or less. Otherwise, it goes into your hand. So if you can find something to crew this immediately, then that's a lot of value for 6 mana, and then you've got this big thing threatening to block or attack or whatever. So this is really powerful. It can also search other copies of itself and just chain together, but you need to get to that late game, so I don't think you're taking this super, super highly. Voyage Home, I would take a little bit more highly just because it can come down cheaper. I think it's a little bit more powerful. This is 5 white-blue for a sorcery. It's got affinity for artifacts, so it costs 1 less for each artifact you control. Draw 3 cards, gain 3 life. There's really not much card draw or card advantage in this set. And if you build your deck right, I think that this can cost 4 mana pretty regularly. That would be having 3 artifacts in play, at which point you're pretty jazzed about it. So there's another one. We'll sort of see. It is expensive, but I think, if you're going to build around it, I think it's going to be quite powerful for you. because this is exactly what you want, right? You get the 3 cards, and then you get the 3 life to give you the extra time to utilize those cards. And then we've got a rare Mendicant Core Guidelight. It's blue-white for a star 3. Its power equal to the number of artifacts you control. It's got start your engines. It's got max speed. Whenever you cast an artifact, you may pay 1. If you do, copy it. So this one's going to ask you to find some ways to actually get through for damage to build up your speed. This is a bit more of a build around. You got to be in blue-white, and you have to have ways to damage your opponent, which I don't think you're always going to have in blue-white. Okay. So in blue-white, we basically just want to have a ton of artifacts in play. And we're going to do that by playing cheap artifacts or things that make multiple artifacts. So Nesting Bot, the 1-mana 1/1 artifact creature that dies into a 1/1 artifact creature, is really good here. Nimble Thopterus, the 3/2 that makes a 1/1 artifact. Ticket Tortoise is a 2-mana 3/1 artifact, and when it enters, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you get a treasure token. So this one, I mean, it's going to stabilize you early and hopefully some of the time get you a treasure. You can always play this on your turn 3 before you play your land to make sure you get your treasure. If your opponent went first and they've got more lands than you, you're going to want to make sure you do that. Diversion Unit, the 2-mana 2/1 flying that can sacrifice to counter spell. Guidelight Optimizer is 1 blue for a 2/1 artifact creature that can tap for blue to cast artifact spells or activate abilities. So this kind of pays you double because it's an artifact itself, and then helps you ramp into your artifacts. Sundial Dawn Tyrant, again, the 1 blue 3/3. All 3 of these are also important because they can be searched for by the big blue Guidelight Pathmaker, the blue-white 6/5, and they can immediately crew it. So these are great examples of cards that you want to have in your deck that can crew that immediately. And then you want cards that key off of how many artifacts you have. So Guidelight Synergist, 3 and a white, 0/4 flying, gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control. Memory Guardians, 5-mana 3/4 flying, but it costs 1 less for each artifact you control. And stuff that makes your artifacts cheaper. Voyager Quick Welder, 2 and a white for a 2/4 artifact creature that makes your artifacts cost 1 less. So that's basically what's going on with blue-white. It's a slower deck, I think, trying to build up a big board state and have a lot of artifacts in play. White-black, speed, and attrition. So this deck is all about getting to max speed and using that to take over the mid to late game. So Embalmed Ascendance, 1 white-black for a 1/2. It's got Start Your Engines. When it enters, you get a 2/2 zombie, and when you have max speed, it says whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. So a lot of value here. It's a 1/2 and a 2/2 for just 3 mana. Get your speed going. And then the idea with this deck is if you can sort of stay in the game and get to max speed, you will overwhelm the smaller, faster decks with everything you've got going on. So this is kind of like it's kind of part aggressive, part mid-rangey kind of deck, I think. Dune Drifter is X white-black for a 3/3 vehicle with crew 2. When it enters, return target artifact or creature card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you want to have lots of 2 and 3 mana stuff that's going to die early, and then you're going to be able to get it right back with this. So getting your Embalmed Ascendant back, for example, is quite powerful with something like this. And our rare is Zahur Glory's Pass. This is white-black for a 3/2 with Start Your Engines. It says sacrifice another creature to surveil 1. You can only do that once per turn. And then when you have max speed, whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you get a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. So giving yourself a free way to sacrifice your own creatures is quite powerful in a deck like this, especially if you've got the Embalmed Ascendant going where you're draining every time that happens and you're getting a 2/2 zombie. This just really gets going on your opponent. So this is quite powerful. So what do we want? We want cheap creatures that provide value when they die or provide value when they enter, and that can get your speed going and attack through your opponent's creatures to increase your speed. It's a lot of things, but we do have ways to do that. So Nesting Bot, get your engine started right away. Turn 1, beautiful. It's a little bit awkward for your opponents to block this because you just get another 1/1, or it blocks well for you if you're trying to race or defend against the aggressive decks. Leonin Surveyor, stuff like Leonin Surveyor, this is 2 mana for a 2/2, Start Your Engines. It has first strike on your turn, and then later in the game, if you have max speed, you can exile it from your graveyard to draw a card. So it's going to get you up to max speed, early in the game, pressure your opponent, and then later provide that value that this deck is looking for. Momentum Breaker, which we already talked about, the 2-mana enchantment, start your engines, make them sacrifice something. Then later in the game, you could sacrifice it to gain life equal to your speed. So gaining 4 off of something like this is going to put some distance between you and your aggressive opponent. Hour of Victory, the 3-mana enchantment that makes it 2/2, and then later you can sacrifice it to search for something. Pride of the Road, 4 mana for a 2/5 Vigilance. It's got Start Your Engines. This is more of a payoff card, as is Hour of Victory. These are not cards that you're trying to play early in the game. You want to have max speed when you cast these, right? So this says max speed at the beginning of combat on your turn. Target creature or vehicle you control gains double strike. So that's really, really great. If you've got max speed when this comes down, immediately you're hitting for a surprise double strike damage with something. That's really quite powerful, but obviously you want to make sure you've got your engine started early. Risen Necroregent, which we already talked about, 5 mana, 5/4, max speed. You get a 2/2 zombie at the end of each of your turns. So yeah, you want to start on turn 1. You want to have 1-drops. You want to get your speed going as quickly as possible. So the dream here, right, is like you play a 1-mana card. You play a 2-mana card that starts your engines, and you hit them with your 1-drop. Now you're at 2. And then, you could be at max speed in the next couple of turns if you're able to get in for damage. So that's really going to be key in decks like this, so that you can capitalize on these payoffs. Okay, more stuff that works here. So Wreckage Wicker Folk, 1 and a black for a 1/3 flying, provides some value in a Surveil 2 when it comes in. And this is a real nice one because it can peck in for 1 and make sure that you're increasing your speed as the game goes through. With some nice evasions here. Carrion Cruiser, 2 and a black for a 3/2 vehicle with crew 1. When it enters, you mill 2, and then return a creature or vehicle from your graveyard to your hand. So just another sort of smallish creature, but it's going to give you some value, keep you in the late game. And Hellish Sideswipe, you're going to have some smaller stuff. You're going to have some nesting bots. You might have some of the black artifact, the Bauble, that gives -2/-2. You're going to be able to get some value out of Hellish Sideswipe, single black. Sorcery, you sacrifice an artifact or creature and destroy a creature or vehicle. And if you sacrifice a vehicle, you get to draw a card, which is, I don't know how often that's going to happen, but that's cool. All right, moving on to white-red mount and vehicle aggro. Signpost Uncommons, Cloudspire Coordinator, red-white for a 3/1. When it enters, you scry 2, and you can tap it to create X 1/1 pilot tokens, where X is the number of mounts and or vehicles that entered the battlefield under your control this turn. So a little bit of a weird one. I mean, it's aggressive. It's 2 mana, 3/1. It crews well, provides value. It gives you more tokens, but it's like, do you want to be attacking with this or tapping it to make stuff? I'm not sure. But I think it's just a whole lot of rate in one little package there, so I like it just because of that. Cloudspire Sky Cycle is 2 red-white for a 2/3 vehicle with flying and crew 1. When it enters, distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 other target vehicles and or creatures you control. So this just works with whatever. It doesn't have to be only vehicles, only mounts, any creatures. So that's a lot of power and toughness. Crew 1's not too bad. It's got flying, so it's going to be able to pressure. I dig it. Culloden Triumph Caster is the rare. This is red-white for a 2/3. Gives mounts and vehicles you control haste, and whenever a mount or a vehicle enters, it immediately becomes saddled or crewed, respectively. So this gets to ignore that pesky crew cost for the first turn. This is going to be really nice. 2 mana, 2/3s, quite good to begin with, and then just letting your vehicles and mounts hit for free right off the hop is a really nice aggressive card. I like this one a lot. Okay. Now, here's an interesting card. I said most cards don't care specifically about vehicles, but this one does. Explosive Getaway is 3 red-white. This is a rare sorcery. Exile up to 1 target artifact or creature. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So you're going to be targeting your own thing with that, because Explosive Getaway deals 4 damage to each creature. So the idea with this, I think, is if you've got a good amount of vehicles in your deck and, like, 1 good creature and maybe a couple of pilots or whatever that you don't care about, you can exile your good creature. This will hit all creatures for 4. Your vehicles won't get hit by it because they're not creatures at the time that you cast this. And you get a nice one-sided board sweep. So I think this is quite powerful if you have the right deck for it. But again, this is going to incentivize you to put more vehicles in your deck. So you might be weakening yourself by doing so, but I thought it was an interesting one to bring up. Okay, so As we've said before, I'm leaning towards more mounts than vehicles in decks like this. So look for cheap mounts that are going to benefit from your Signpost Uncommons, Brightfield Glider, 1 mana 1/1 Vigilance that can gain flying, get bigger if you saddle it, Gilded Goda that makes a treasure when you saddle it, 2 mana 2/2. The links we talked about earlier, 2 mana 2/3 life link. If you saddle it, you get a basic plains. These are all just really, really good. And then you've got your cheap vehicles. These I would prioritize much less highly, but if you want to include 2 or 3 of these, I think you can. Burner Rocket, Spot Cycle Scouter we talked about earlier. Air Response Units, 2 and a white for a 3/3 Flying Vigilance with Crew 1. Again, just looks really good, but I think is just not that good. But, I mean, we will play a few of these, certainly, in a deck like this. And then you're looking for stuff that keys off of vehicles. So Canyon Vaulter, 1 and a white for the 3/1. When it crews or mounts, that thing gets flying. That's really quite good. Cloudspire Captain gives mounts of vehicles you control +1/+1. And that's a 2 mana 2/3. Spire Mech Cycle is 4 and a red for a 5/4 haste. Crew 2 vehicle. It has an exhaust ability. You can tap another mount or vehicle you control to make the Mech Cycle a artifact creature, so permanently. Or is it permanent? Yeah, it is permanent, and it gets a +1/+1 counter for each mount and vehicle you control. So if you've got enough mounts and vehicles in your deck, then this is gonna hit for like 7 or 8 haste damage and stay that big. That's it's a really powerful card. Really good reason to be in this deck. And like any good aggro deck, you need combat tricks. So Light Shield Parry is single white, instant, gives +2/+2. You can cycle it if you don't need it. Pedal to the Metal. This one is less exciting, but it's got great art. X and a red, target creature gets +X/+0 and gains first strike. So for just 1 red, you're giving something first strike. That can win a combat, and then sometimes it's going to kill them out of nowhere. So I like it well enough. I wouldn't play more than 1, but I think it's decent. On to green-white mount and vehicle mid-range. So this is like an aggressive deck, very similar to red-white, but I think in the rock paper scissors type metagame thing, this would beat red-white every time because this is going a little bit bigger and it's got just a little bit more sort of range to it. Signpost Uncommons, Legoran Soul of Alakria is a 2 mana 1/1 flying. It's a mount. When it attacks while saddled, you put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target mounts and or vehicles. So it's going to grow every time you saddle it, and then it might grow something else. 2 mana 1/1 is not a great stat line, but we can see what we're trying to do here. And then Veteran Beast Rider is a 3 mana 3/4. At the beginning of your end step, untap each creature you control. It's got an activated ability of 2 green-white to give your team +1/+1. So this kind of allows you to crew stuff for quote-unquote free, crew and mount stuff for free. You'll get to block on the way back. And it's a really good rate, and that activated ability is no joke. If you ever get to activate that twice in a turn, you'll be really putting the hurt on your opponents. The rare is Caradora, Heart of Alakria. This is 4 mana for a 4/2. When it enters, search your library for a mount or vehicle and put it to your hand. And if 1 or more +1/+1 counters will be put on a creature or vehicle you control, you get an extra 1. So good rate, searches for something. The 1/1 counter text is kind of going to come up sometimes. It's just a solid card for this deck. So again, prioritize mounts. Mounts over vehicles. Mounts over vehicles. Okay, Brightfield Glider, Glory Heath Lynx, Venom Sack Lagak is 1 and a green for a 2/1 Death Touch. When it attacks while saddled, it gets +0/+3. It's going to be really hard to block as a 2/4 with Death Touch. And then when you get to untap it for free, thanks to your uncommon, you've also got a nice Death Toucher on blocks. Vehicles you can play. Again, I wouldn't recommend too many of these. Spot Cycle Scouter, Air Response Unit. Broadcast Rambler is kind of an interesting one for this deck. It's going a little bit larger than the red-white version. It's 4 and a white for a 5/4 with Crew 1. When it enters, you get a Thopter token. So it gives you a way to crew it itself, and it's a little bit bigger for your mid-range game plan. Combat Tricks. Defend the Rider. This is a real nice one for green. Single green for an instant. Choose 1, target permanent you control gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, or create a pilot token that crews things as though its power were 2 greater. So this will be real fun to flash in on your opponent's turn and crew a vehicle that they're not expecting to be able to block. That's pretty sweet. And then hexproof indestructible won't always win a combat for you, but when it does, it's going to work quite well. So I think there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of power here. Run over is 1 and a green for a instant. Deals target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. At instant speed, that's quite nice, and it costs 1 less if it targets a mount or vehicle. Light shield parry, single white +2/+2. So pretty standard green-white plan, kind of mid-rangey aggro, cares about mounts. All right, blue-black artifact control. This is an interesting one. I'm not sure how good this deck is going to be. This is a hard one to evaluate. Haunted Hellride, your first signpost. This is a 3-mana 3/3 vehicle with crew 1. Whenever you attack target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains death touch, and you get to untap that creature. So lets you play a little offense and defense if you've got some smaller creatures you want to peck in with. Haunt the Network I do like quite a bit. This is 3 blue-black for a sorcery. You create 2 1/1 Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying, and then the opponent loses X life and you gain X life for the number of artifacts you control. So this could quite easily be 5 mana, drain them for 4 and get 2 1/1 flyers, which is really quite powerful. And then our rare is Winter Cursed Rider. This is blue-black for a 3/2 with ward, pay 2 life. It says artifacts you control have ward, pay 2 life. Ward means that anything that tries to target your stuff gets countered unless they pay the cost, which is, in this case, 2 life. It's got an exhaust ability of 2 blue-black. You can tap it. Exile X artifacts from your graveyard. Each other non-artifact creature gets -1 or -X until end of turn. So, I mean, a 2-mana 3/2 that protects your stuff is pretty sweet. And then the exhaust ability is kind of gravy. So I think there's a lot of power there. Yeah, the uncommons look good. The rest of the deck, I'm interested to see how it comes together. You're obviously going to want a bunch of artifacts. Grim Bauble is the absolute best common for this deck. The single black artifact gives something -2/-2. Packdoll Terror is a 4-mana artifact. It's a 3/4, and when it or another artifact enters, each opponent loses 1, you gain 1. So obviously what we're trying to do there. Hellish Sideswipe. You're going to have a lot of artifacts to sacrifice, I should hope. Single black, sacrifice something, destroy something. Really good with Grim Bauble, of course. You're going to want early game plays that are defensive and are also artifacts. So Midnight Mangler, 1 blue for a 3/3 vehicle that's crewed as long as it's not your turn, and then it's got crew 2 if you want to attack with it. So blocks as a 3/3 for free. That's pretty nice, and it, of course, is an artifact. Ticket Tortoise, the 2-mana 3/1 that makes treasure if they've got more lands than you. Wreckage Wicker Folk, the 2-mana 1/3 flying. Surveil 2 when it comes in. Yeah, early plays that block well and are artifacts. And then you want artifacts that provide value so that you can get ahead in the late game. So Carrion Cruiser, the 3-mana 3/2 vehicle. Crew 1, mills you 2, then you get something back. Hull Drifters, 5-mana 3/2 vehicle with flying and crew 3. And when it enters, you draw 2 cards. And Wretched Dull, it's 2-mana 3/1 artifact creature that you pay black and tap it to surveil 1. So good early, good late. And then we are like somewhat interested in the speed thing as well, because our first signpost uncommon that gives death touch to your creature is going to let you peck in for damage. So if you find yourself with ways to start your engines, then all these payoffs start to make sense. So Risen Necro Regent that makes the zombie tokens, Hour of Victory that lets you tutor for something, and the Surveyor cards, there's a black one as well that's not as good, but the blue one's pretty good. Glitch Ghost Surveyor is 3-mana 2/2 flying, and then you can exile from your graveyard by paying 3 mana to draw a card later in the game. So yeah, it's a defensive early deck that's kind of trying to drain your opponent out and win in the late game. Not sure how good it's going to be, but it looks cool. Blue-red Looting and Cycling. So our signpost uncommons, Boosted Sloop is 1 blue-red for a 3/3 vehicle with Menace and crew 1. Whenever you attack, you get to draw a card and discard a card. Now, this text whenever you attack means any creature of yours that attacks is going to trigger this. So you don't have to crew this. If you've just got a 2/2 chilling, it attacks right away, you get to do the draw card discard. So that's really powerful static ability for this to have. And then a 3/3 with Menace is pretty good. If you can crew it, great. Broadside Barrage, we already talked about. 1 blue-red, instant deals 5, you draw and then you discard. And then the rare is Captain Howler Sea Scourge, 2 blue-red for a 5/4 with ward of 2 mana and 2 life. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn for each card discarded in this way. And whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player this turn, you draw cards. So that's a huge ability there. So if you got some stuff with flying, now you're hitting them for an enormous amount of damage every time you discard, and drawing extra cards as well. So really nice one for this deck for sure. And there's another one too, another rare, Fearless Swashbuckler, 1 blue-red for a fish pirate, 3/3 with haste, gives vehicles haste whenever you attack. If a pirate and a vehicle attack this combat, draw 3 and discard 2. Getting to discard 2 cards essentially for free is enormous in this deck, but you're going to need to make sure you've got pirates and vehicles attacking together. It's going to be pretty hard to do, so don't take this early, but if you've got enough of those types in your deck, it might fit well. Okay, so want to find ways to discard cards. One of those ways is cycling, spinning your wheels. Am I right? Spinning your wheels? Haven't heard that one yet. So I'm going to put that out there. Spinning your wheels in the Aetherdrift car set. Okay, Marauding Mako, Scrounging Skyray, both do the same thing. They get bigger when you discard stuff, and they have cycling. Got Magmakin Artillerist. Again, when you discard one or more cards, this deals that much damage to each opponent. That's a 3-mana 1/4. It also has cycling for 2. And when you cycle it deals a damage. That's kind of cool. And there's also Monument to Endurance. Whenever you discard a card, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. They lose 3 life, you draw a card, or you create a treasure. So probably going to be lose 3 life a lot of the time. That's pretty quick way to end the game. But yeah, this one looks like specifically good in blue-red. So look out for this one. And then we're looking for other ways to discard. I don't think you want to go all in on cycling. It's not that good in this set. You want cards that are going to sort of provide value on their own and then let you discard. So these are the key types of cards I want to see supporting the cards that we just talked about. Grease Wrench Goblin, the 1-mana 2/1, with exhaust of 3, discard 2, and then draw that many. Keen Buccaneer, 3-mana 2/3 with vigilance, exhaust for 2 mana, draw and then discard, and then it gets bigger. And then Thunderhead Gunner, this one's pretty cool. This is 5 mana for a 4/5 with Reach, Secret Reach, and you could just do this as many times as you want, once per turn, but like the exhaust ones you can only do once. This one you can do every turn. Discard a card to draw a card. Simple as that. No mana investment, nothing. Blocks really well for you. So this one, if you've got a couple of these in your deck and a lot of payoffs, like this is just going to slowly accrue a ton of value over the course of the game. And I think this one is actually pretty cool for this deck. Some cycling cards that provide value as you cycle them are kind of nice. So Howler's Heavy, this blue card here, 3 and a blue for a 3/4. With cycling of 1 and a blue. When you cycle it, target creature or vehicle an opponent controls gets -3, -0. A little bit of a combat trick in disguise here. 2 mana, shrink their thing. Maybe you get to kill it in combat, right? If they're similar sized creatures, you get to draw a card because it's cycling, and you get to trigger your payoffs. That's kind of cool. Not super powerful, but definitely fits here. Cards with single mana cycling are just really good. So Clamorous Ironclad is a very medium card, but the cycling for a single red is just really quite nice when you've got a lot of payoffs. And then something like Fuel the Flames, if you're more control slanted, which I think this deck will be, 3 mana, deal 2 to everything. But you can also cycle it if it's not good, or if you've got a lot of payoffs that want you to cycle it. Okay. Green-blue, Exhaust Ramp, Sky Serpent Seeker. Really nice one here. Green-blue for a 1/1 with flying and death touch. It's got an exhaust ability. Remember, exhaust is an activated ability. You can do it at any time, but you can only do it once. Pay 4 colorless mana to exhaust this. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you get 2 lands. Put them in the battlefield tapped, and then you put a +1/+1 counter on this. So early on, this is going to hopefully deter your opponents from attacking you, and then a little bit later, it's going to ramp you. So this deck is all about getting a bunch of mana and activating exhaust abilities and doing big stuff. Ranger's Aether Hive is 1 green-blue for a 3/5 vehicle with vigilance and crew 1. Whenever you activate an exhaust ability, you get a 1/1 Thopter. So if you're doing a lot of exhausting, that's great. You're going to get a lot of value out of this. And crew 1 for a 3/5 vigilance, that's big. It's a big game. Blocks and attacks quite well. Your rare is Sita Varma Masked Racer. Green-blue for a 2/3. It's got exhaust of X, green-green-blue. Put X +1/+1 counters on it. Then you may have the base power and toughness of each other creature you control become equal to Sita Varma's until end of turn. So it's kind of like an overrun effect. So if you've got like 6 mana to dump into this, this is +3. And then the rest of your team becomes base power 5/5. That's pretty sweet, especially if you made a few Thopters. I think this one's pretty darn good. So we're looking for stuff that sort of works with exhaust, works well with exhaust. So the one nice build around this deck does get is Elvish Refueler. It's 2 and a green for a 2/3. During your turn, as long as you haven't activated an exhaust ability this turn, you may activate exhaust abilities as though they haven't been activated. So essentially lets you re-exhaust your stuff, but only once per turn. And then it's got its own exhaust ability of 1 and a green to get a +1/+1 counter. Want stuff that's going to provide mana to help us pay these costs. Pit Automaton and Guidelight Optimizer, both 2 mana creatures that can add mana to activate abilities. And then we want stuff with good exhaust abilities. Cards that are hopefully good on their own as well. So Green Belt Guardian, the 2 mana 2/2 that exhausts for 4 and becomes a 5/5. Stampeding Scurryfoot is a 1 mana 1/1. Always nice to have 1-drops in this format, as your opponents are going to be trying to get their speed started. This one's got exhaust for 3 and a green to get a 1/1 counter and make a 3/3. Really quite nice. Repeatedly doing this is also really good. Ranger's Refueler is a 2 mana vehicle. It's a 3/3 with crew 2. Whenever you activate an exhaust ability, draw a card. So, yeah, I mean, not much more to say there. And then it's got its own exhaust ability of 4 mana, becomes an artifact creature, and it gets a 1/1 counter. So this is a 6 mana 4/4 draw card on its own in installments, which I think is good enough. And of course, when it's keying off of all your other exhaust stuff, give you extra cards. Really powerful here. We're just also looking for ways to just get more mana, right? So Pothole Mole, just a nice 3 mana 2/3 that's most of the time going to get you a land. I think that's just kind of good enough for this deck. And then look out for cards that have activated abilities that aren't exhaust abilities. They're still pretty good. Beast Rider Vanguard, 2 mana 2/2. You pay 5 to look at the top 3 and then put a permanent from among them into your hand. You know, that's a good ability to be activating with all your mana. And you could do it repeatedly, no matter what. And then another card that's just good rate, I think, is Hazard of the Dunes, 4 mana 4/4. Trample Reach, love that. Exhaust for 7 to put 3 1/1 counters on it. So there you go. Green-blue, pretty self-explanatory. Black-red, Speed Aggro. Want to get your speed going, want to kill them as quickly as possible. Gastel Thrill Seeker, really nice one. Black-red for a 2/3. Start your engines. When it enters, it deals 1 damage to target opponent. You gain 1 life. So that's speed of 2 right away. And then max speed, it's got Death Touch and Haste. It's just like a ton of punishment here for just 2 mana. The other uncommon, not as good, but still pretty cool, is a 4 mana 6/5 vehicle. It's called Apocalypse Runner. It's got crew 3, and it has tap to give target creature you control with power 2 or less, lifelink, and can't be blocked. So this acts as a way to sort of just push damage on its own if you don't have a way to crew it, and then if you do have a way to crew it, it's hitting for 6. So neither side's super exciting, but I think you will play it here. Your rare Far Fortune End Boss, 4 mana for 4/5. With Start Your Engines, whenever you attack, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then it's got max speed of a source you control would deal damage to an opponent, or a permanent they control deals that much +1. So again, just kind of a lot of rate here, and upping your damage by 1 is always nice. So we want to start the game on turn 1, as I've said before. You want your 1 mana card followed by your Start Your Engines card. You hit them with your 1-drop. Now you're at speed 2. Over the next 2 turns, you get to speed 4. You're off to the races, as it were. So we want good 1-drops. Dynamite Diver, Engine Rat, Grease Wrench Goblin are all cards that come down on turn 1. Get that going for you, and they've got a little bit of late game value as well. We want cards to start your engine on turn 2. And Rider Catalyzer, Momentum Breaker, Walking Sarcophagus, all 2-drops that start your engines. The Momentum Breaker is probably the best of them, but I mean, the Catalyzer being a 3/1 is also pretty sweet. The Sarcophagus is not great, but you're going to play it anyways because you want to get your engines started. You want payoffs for having max speed. These are all cards we've talked about already. And Riser Spike Spinner, that gives you an impulse draw every turn. Risen Necro Regents, that gives you 2/2 zombies. An Hour of Victory that lets you tutor for stuff. All really powerful here. And you want your combat tricks. Pedal to the Metal, X and a red for strike plus X+O. Maximum Overdrive, 1 and a black, get a 1/1 counter on a creature and gains Death Touch Indestructibles. This one's gonna win you that combat every time, make your thing bigger. It's 2 mana, but you know, it's gonna do the thing. We also get to utilize some of the sort of quote-unquote lesser removal in the set, because if you're an aggressive deck, you just want stuff that can kill big things most of the time. That's what you're going to have trouble with. So spin out 1 black, destroy a creature, and crash and burn 3 and a red, deal 6 to something. These are pretty interchangeable and both fit well here. You can play a couple of these and you'll be happy. All right. Black-green Self-Mill is next. This deck is another one. I don't know how good it is, but try to put stuff in your graveyard and get benefits. So Broodheart Engine, it's black-green for an artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get to surveil 1, and you can pay 2 black-green, tap and sacrifice it to return target creature or vehicle from your graveyard to the battlefield as a sorcery. Thundering Broodwagon is 2 black, green for a 6/5 vehicle with menace and reach. When it enters, you destroy target non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value 4 or less. It's got crew 3. It's got cycling for 2. So whole lot of mana here, but you get to kill something right away, and it hits pretty hard. You can also cycle it into your graveyard if you've got a way to reanimate it. Your rare is Attrition Emerald Radiant, 3 black, green for a 3/3. When it enters, you get a 1/1 green insect token for each artifact and or creature in your graveyard. So obviously if you're filling your graveyard and this is making like 3 or 4 bugs for you, you're gonna be real fired up about that. And then whenever another insect you control dies, this gets a 1/1 counter and each opponent loses 1 life. So that's a real good reason to be in this deck, I think. And then we've got Debris Beetle, which we talked about before. This doesn't really like fit the theme. It's just really good rate. 4 mana, 6/6, trample, crew 2, and drains them for 3 when it comes into play. So really good. Okay, so we're looking for ways to fill our graveyard. There's not that many, but these are some of the better ones. Molt Tender is a 1 mana, 1/1, single green. You can tap to just mill a card, great. And you can tap it to exile a card from your graveyard to add 1 mana of any color. So it's help ramp, help fix if we're splashing. Pothole Mole is going to be a fixture of this deck. This is a 3 mana 2/3, mills you for 3, and then you get a land from your graveyard to hand. So doing everything we want to do. Carrion Cruiser, 3 mana 3/2, vehicle, crew 1, mills 2, and bring something back. A little bit of value there. And then we want stuff that pays us off for having stuff in our graveyard. So Earth Rumblers, 4 and a green for a 7/6 vehicle with vigilance and trample and crew 3, which is kind of rough, but it's got a nice activated ability of exile an artifact or creature from your graveyard to make this an artifact or make this an artifact creature until end of turn. So kind of a quote-unquote free instant speed crew for this. It's going to make it really hard for your opponents to attack you if you've got anything in your graveyard, and it hits real hard as well. So this is where you're going to want Earth Rumbler. Rise from the Wreck, another interesting one. It's a 3 mana sorcery. Return up to 1 target creature, 1 target mount, 1 target vehicle, 1 target creature with no abilities from your graveyard to hand. So could get you 4 cards back. Probably won't most of the time, but if this is getting 2 or 3 things, it's going to be pretty powerful. So fill up your graveyard and then Rise from the Wreck. It's all good. Ooze Patrol is 4 mana for a 2/2. Mills you for 2 and then puts a +1/+1 counter on itself for each artifact or creature in your graveyard. So, I mean, yeah, you want this to be a 5/5 or bigger, I think, most of the time, but it'll fit in this deck. Some other stuff that works here. Back on Track is a 5 mana black sorcery. Return target creature or vehicle from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you get a pilot token. So if you've got big stuff to put into your graveyard, this will work for you. Dredger's Insight, 1 and a green. Enchantment that mills you for 4, and then from among those cards, you can take an artifact, creature, or land to your hand. I don't love this just because it doesn't provide any board presence like the way the mole does, but it will work here, and then it will gain you life occasionally, but not all that often. Loxodon Surveyor, 3 mana 3/3. Start your engines, and you can exile it from your graveyard to draw a card if you have max speed. So this is like another one where it's fine. You're probably not going to have max speed all that often in this deck, but if you do find ways to get that and you mill this incidentally, then you can draw a card off of it. So that kind of that sound effect I just made is kind of this deck, in my opinion. So I don't know, we'll see. Looks cool, but I don't think it looks that good. Rocketeer Boost Buggy, we're getting into red-green exhaust. This is our last archetype. This is red-green for a 3/2 vehicle with crew 1. Whenever it attacks, create a treasure token. Love that. And exhaust for 3 to make it an artifact creature permanently and put a +1/+1 counter on it. So, I mean, at the very least, you could play this on 2, turn 3, exhaust it, attack, get a treasure token. That's not too bad. And then obviously, like, getting a treasure every turn off of this is really quite powerful. Boom Scholar is 1 red-green for 3/3. Exhaust abilities of other permanents cost 2 less. And then you could pay 4 red-green for its own exhaust ability. Creatures and vehicles you control gain trample until end of turn, and you put 2 +1/+1 counters on just this creature. So, yeah, I mean, 3 mana, 3/3 helps you pay exhaust costs and makes your team bigger, or makes your team gain trample. Does not make them bigger, but it's nice anyway. Redshift Rocketeer Chief is a red-green for a 2/3 vigilance. It taps to add X mana of any one color where that's its power, and you can only activate abilities with that mana. And then it's got an exhaust ability that doesn't really matter. You got to pay 12 mana for it. But yeah, I mean, just this ramping for you and being an early play is really quite nice. So some cards that work with exhaust abilities. Adrenaline Jockey is a 3 mana 3/3. And it says whenever you activate an exhaust ability, it gets a +1/+1 counter. And whenever a player casts a spell and it's not their turn, this deals 4 damage to them. This really benefits you in this deck because you're going to be looking to activate exhaust abilities on your opponent's turn more so than casting spells. But if your opponent is playing a blue deck, they're going to be trying to cast spells on your turn, and this is going to make that real difficult for them. 4 damage is a huge hit, and just the floor of a 3 mana 3/3 that can get bigger is really quite nice. Then we got Elvish Refueler, the 3 mana 2/3 that lets you re-exhaust stuff. It's hard to say. And then stuff with exhaust abilities that we like. Stampeding Scurryfoot, the 1 mana 1/1 that makes 3/3. Greenbelt Guardian, the 2 mana 2/2 that gets 3 bigger. Pace Setter Paragon is a 2 and a red 2/3 with exhaust of 2 and a red to put a +1/+1 counter on it and give it double strike. This one's pretty cool because you always have that threat of activation that you're going to give it double strike. It makes it really hard to block or attack into if you've got the mana up. And then if you've got the cards that let you redo the exhaust abilities, then this gets real nasty. Spire Mech Cycle is the 5 mana 5/4 with haste. You've got to tap another mount or vehicle to do the exhaust thing here, so make sure you've got a couple of mounts in your deck, more than a couple, probably 4 plus. So Gilded Goda, Venom Sack Lagak are 2 examples of mounts that you would play in this deck to enable the mech cycle. You want your combat tricks, Defend the Rider we talked about, that can make pilots or give stuff hexproof and indestructible. Bestow Greatness, 3 mana instant +4/+4 and trample. It's pretty decent here. And Pedal to the Metal, X and a red for +X, and First Strike. All right, let's talk a little draft strategy before we go. Pack 1, stay close to 1 color if possible. A few off-color cards are okay. Prioritize cheaper cards. So if we can stay 1 color in pack 1, we're going to be real happy about that. That doesn't always happen, but that's what we're trying to do. The better your early picks are, the more you want to stick to that color. The worse your early picks are, the more you want to take chances on other colors. And then we want to pay special attention to picks 9 through 14. This is known as the wheel. If you've never played in person before, and you've only ever played on Arena, you may not know that you're actually seeing that first pack again come pick 9. It goes all the way around the table, and you get to see the cards that no one else at the table took. So if there's some good playables in a color there, you might want to consider moving into that color, as it's possible that no one else at the table is drafting that color, which will be really good for you come pack 2 and pack 3. In packs 2 and 3, we're continuing to take powerful cards of our main color where possible, and we're going to let the good cards we open or get past determine our secondary color and final archetype. Pay special attention to pack direction. The pack moves in the opposite direction during pack 2, so you may see opposite signals. If you're seeing a lot of red in pack 1, you may not see as much in pack 2. That's okay. You're going to see it again in pack 3, so don't panic. All right, we'll play a little game of Where Does It Belong? I like to do this in my videos now. I'm going to show you 4 white cards that look similar in power level, but we want to talk about where they belong, what decks they go into. So Nesting Bot, I think this fits into every white deck, right? This is a 1 mana 1/1, start your engines, dies into a 1/1, and has a max speed bonus. So blue-white wants this because it's an artifact that dies into an artifact. Black-white wants this because it gives you start your engines, and it's got the attrition stuff going on of dying into another creature. And white, red, and white-green both want this because they're aggressive decks that want to get started on turn 1. And probably care in some way about starting your engines. So this fits into every deck, and I think you want to take it higher than these other cards we're about to talk about. Pride of the Road, this is the 3 and a white 2/5 vigilance, start your engines, max speed, give something double strike on your combat. Well, blue-white doesn't really care about this because blue-white isn't interested in starting your engine. It's not a very aggressive deck, I don't think. You're not going to play this in blue-white. But you will play this in white-black for sure, as we talked about. And you'll play this in white-red and white-green as well, just because they're aggressive decks. And if you can get that max speed bonus, you're going to be happy about that. Cloudspire Captain is 2 and a white for a 2/3, gives mounts and vehicles +1/+1. Well, you don't have much going on with mounts and vehicles in blue-white or white-black, but you certainly do in red-white and green-white, so you're going to want to play it there, but not in the first two. And then Guidelight Synergist, 3 and a white for the 0/4 flying, +1/+0 for each artifact you control. Obviously, this only really goes in blue-white where you're playing a ton of artifacts. It could theoretically fit in black-white, but I think mainly this is a blue-white card. So just to give you an idea, like if you pick Guidelight Synergist first, you're really only interested in taking blue and white cards from there, whereas if you pick Nesting Bot first, you can go in any direction with that. And these are all pretty similar in power level, in my opinion. So just think about that. As you're going through the draft, just ask yourself, where does this card fit? Do I want to keep myself open to drafting different decks, or am I already in a deck, and does this card fit into that deck? Okay. Deck building tips: play 2 colors, try not to splash. Sometimes you have to because you just don't have enough good cards, in which case you want to make sure you've got some of those dual lands that gain you life, because you really don't want to be playing 3 basics of your off color, of your splash color. It's really quite bad. So just try to stick to 2 colors when you can. Play 17 lands. A deck with no cards that cost more than 4 mana can play 16 lands, but generally you want to play 17. And you want to play a low curve, especially in this set where a lot of players are going to be trying to get their engine started, try to attack you early. You want to have 1-drops, you want to have lots of 2-drops, and only a few 5s and above that are really important to your deck, but you don't want to have too many of those. Okay? Thank you so much for watching. Would love to hear from you. Leave a comment. If you've got any questions, let me know how your drafts are going. Let me know what you're excited for. Let me know what content you'd like to see in the future. And please do take a second to click that like button, that subscribe button. Helps grow the channel, helps share the channel with other folks like yourself. And of course, you can also tell your friends about what we're doing here. That also helps me in a big way. If you'd like to reach out directly, it's howtodraftmtg@gmail.com. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck in your drafts. Bye for now.